slight sound of wind in the background. I'm watching a Kyiv live stream. Hello, welcome to the weekly voice chat. This is the Friday chat for the Men's Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi-official server of the Men's Rights subreddit. Today's topic is kind of a free chat. Anything to do with men's rights, anything on your mind, anything to do with men's issues. It's kind of an open forum. Obviously, a major topic a lot of people are talking about is Russia and the Ukraine and the war, which unfortunately is tragic. I've been kind of glued to all these live streams. I watched the live stream firefight of the nuclear power plant yesterday, which is unbelievable to watch actual combat live. I mean, I was watching live bullets going back and forth and a nuclear power plant being on fire. Obviously, the stories of Ukrainian men 18 to 60 not being allowed to leave, and Russia forcing young conscripts to go and fight. To me, this is another example of male disposability and how conscription and men being asked to die at a young age has always been a part of human history. So that's obviously probably the biggest issue with men's rights right now. But we all know that the men's rights issues that we talk about happen every single day. Circumcision happens every single day. Male victims of domestic violence being ignored or even blamed happens every single day. Men's health being underfunded happens every single day. The boys' education gap happens every single day. So a lot of people don't like anecdotal evidence, but I think there's a certain value, though, to what is the word on the street. You know, when you're in the gym or you're in the grocery store or you're with your friends and you're just hanging out on a casual Friday night, what are people talking about? Or what are people thinking? You know, I think more and more we're starting to see a kind of breakthrough in terms of people recognizing that sexism against men exists and discrimination against men exists. It's gotten to the point where I can openly call myself an MRA, you know, at work or in a social setting, and not really get a whole lot of backlash. Whereas 6 years ago, I remember 2016 very well, you'd be a pariah. Whereas now it's definitely changed, and we definitely still have challenges, no doubt. We definitely still face slander and smears, no doubt, but it's so much better. So some of the younger members here, you know, 18, 19, 20 years old, who have been doing this for 2, 3 years, had no idea how much worse it was 6, 7, 8 years ago. I know Ma knows this as well as I do. I've been doing this for over a decade, and believe me, it used to be so much worse than it is now. Genesis, if you go to the Friday text chat as you watch this, to a lot of people, so we basically have the voice chat, and then we have the text text chat channel, and to a lot of people, the text chat part is even the main event, even more so than the voice. So do follow that. Feel free to post links or anything you want. Really fast, Genesis, would you mind telling me about the $40 phone? Yeah, it's called the Adacel or something. Alicel phone. And, you know, it's not fancy, but for the things I need, which is I need a camera, I need a phone, I need internet, I need basic apps, and I need to text, there's really zero functional difference between that and a $1,000 iPhone. You know, so anyway, open forum. Anyone has any concerns or thoughts or questions or just anything they want to share? This is an open chat, and yeah, let's do it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Blue. Now, anyone who wants to raise a topic, now is your chance. What would you like to talk about today?
So is the end goal to have women drafted in the United States to deal with male disposability? Is that the end goal you guys are looking at?
No. The end goal would be to end the draft altogether. We want no draft at all.
Okay.
I mean, if there had to be a draft, it's better if it's equal, but the ideal, the optimal solution would be no draft.
Yeah. So we talked about the draft a lot last week. So perhaps we could talk about positive change, or perhaps we could talk about we haven't done circumcision in a while. What are your thoughts? What should we go with?
I think male circumcision is basically male genital mutilation. Enough said.
It's just crazy that it's still done in America. Like it's just a normal thing. It's like people don't even question it. I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, and how could it not be mutilation? You know, it's like anyone who defends the fact that circumcision is not mutilation, and I have this debate with feminists often, defend that viewpoint without bringing up FGM. Don't just say, oh, well, circumcision isn't mutilation because FGM is worse. Because that's like saying, well, rape is okay because genocide is worse. Or nuclear winter is okay because a meteor hitting the earth is worse. Or littering is okay because global warming is worse. Or chopping off someone's finger is okay because chopping off someone's hand is worse. Or making someone blind is okay because making someone blind and deaf is worse. It's a ridiculous argument saying, well, this thing isn't really that bad because this totally other thing is worse. That's not an argument. That's nothing. Something is just bad or good intrinsically. So judge something for the inherent nature of itself, not with some arbitrary comparison to some other thing.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know if apex fallacy is the right word, but they're appealing to the idea that something else is worse, therefore we should ignore this first thing. It's kind of like, when your parents say, oh, you're so lucky, there's kids starving in Africa, and, you should just put up with whatever horrible thing that's happening in your life because somebody somewhere has it worse than you. Well, lots and lots of people have it worse than lots and lots of other people, and it's not a competition. Something that was taught to me by a guy whose spine was completely fused is that even if you have the worst problems in the world, that doesn't mean you can't have sympathy for other people. You can still care about something awful that's happening to somebody else, even if you think that you have it worse or that somebody else has it worse. And I honestly don't think that you can compare these two. You can compare these two things the way they want to, because what they want to do is they want to compare circumcision in hospitals in the USA to circumcision of girls in huts in the outback of Africa. And they want to ignore the boys being circumcised right next to the girls with the same rusty razor blade, while at the same time pretending that the only kind of circumcision that happens to boys is a nice, neat, safe circumcision in America. I mean, there isn't really a safe circumcision, as it were, but like in their viewpoint, it's something that's it's just not comparable. It's like ripping a plaster off in their mind. And it doesn't help that we have things like the South Park sketch where circumcision is such a mild procedure that the baby doesn't even blink when it happens and it's just over instantly. That's not what it's like at all. It's more like 20 to 30 minutes of absolute screaming terror and agony, and the doctor just ignoring all of it. And the baby often goes completely silent because they have just suffered so much pain that they mentally shut down, and it causes them actual brain damage. We have multiple studies to prove this now that we didn't have in our original circumcision episode. We have multiple studies showing that there are lifelong changes to your baby's brain caused by the pain of circumcision. You become a lot less empathetic. It can even increase autism symptoms, although that's controversial, but we do have studies suggesting that. And
Just real
It
fast,
is dangerous.
I'm posting a study showing that right now in the text chat
Yeah.
about permanent damage to the brain.
A lot of this is already on our citations list, but we will very soon be updating that with a brand new citations list, which is just for circumcision. And
It's just, who is fighting back so hard against intactivism? Because a lot of people say, oh, quote, it's the Jews, but that's nonsense because I lived in Los Angeles and I worked in the film industry, so I had many, 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 many Jewish colleagues and coworkers and
I
friends.
think it's traditional conservatives, in my opinion. I think a lot of them are traditional conservatives.
I think I think it's that. I also think that feminists have a. So just to finish what I was saying, I very, 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 very rarely got any negative feedback from a Jewish person for intactivism under the age of 60 or so, unless they were like very religiously conservative. But the average Jewish guy that I knew in LA either agreed with me or didn't really care. Where I get the most hostile pushback, time and time again, I have to be honest, is feminism. And I know there are a lot of feminists who are anti-circumcision. But I will just say, on places like 2X Chromosomes, on subreddits like 2X Chromosomes and Ask Feminists, those are the places where I get the most harsh pushback. So that's just I can't be honest without saying that. If I didn't say that, I would be lying.
Yeah, I think the most pushback I've ever had is from very, 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 very feminist doctors. Pediatricians and people like that seem to be extremely, extremely, like the people who actually perform the procedures, they are in extreme denial about the agony it causes, a lot of them, or at least they seem to be. While others, well, to be honest, they make an awful lot of money out of circumcision being a good thing. And I've recently reread that original research where they, post talking about them trying to research circumcision with brain scans that show that the child's brain actually it changes as the circumcision is happening. And the pushback they got from that, and they couldn't publish it. I don't know if they have managed to publish it, but as far as the rumor goes, they had to destroy their research. And they were told it was just a normal, safe procedure. Go on, Mad.
Believe it or not, there's actually way back in the day, there was actually a back in the Jewish community and everything. There were, they knew that a lot of the times circumcision can actually ruin both parties' experience when it comes to intimacy and stuff like that. So a lot of the Jewish community, they knew that, but because they have such puritanical beliefs whenever it comes to that they don't realize how it's basically going to. There's been plenty of women that have actually had problems with their intimate life because of the fact that the man was circumcised, and that should give you an automatic indicator of maybe leaving somebody's body parts alone and not mutilating them is possibly going to benefit you as well, because there have been plenty of women that have had, issues with their intimate life because of the fact that their man was circumcised rather than not. So
I don't think we need to bring Jews into that, because there are plenty of studies on our website showing that circumcision causes adults to lose sensitivity in their genitals. And
I'm just saying from like a religious, I'm just bringing it from like the religious angle. like a
Sure.
religious, regarding religious rights.
Well,
among
Sure.
I'll just point out that the two most famous Jewish broadcasters in the world, Howard Stern and Joe Rogan, have both repeatedly denounced circumcision and are both publicly and openly against circumcision. So that's something that I think is worth noting. Howard Stern, Joe Rogan, both Jewish and both very much publicly against circumcision. So that's just something that I would say. So I just want to say that because, sometimes when I bring up anti-circumcision, people accuse me of anti-Semitism, which is such nonsense and I've made a video on this before. I said, I'm against it no matter what religion you are. I don't care if you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or atheist. I'm against it, period. So that's just how it is.
What's the motivation for a feminist to be pro-circumcision?
I think it gives MRAs a lot of leverage if they have a very, very valid issue, and it really dents into the male privilege narrative. If you say we have this really, really bad thing that happens to baby boys all across the world, once again, let me be clear. I have talked to many, many feminists who are against circumcision. So I completely give credit to many, many feminists who are against circumcision. But when feminists say that we don't need the men's rights movement because feminism addresses men's issues too, okay, show me where feminists are consistently fighting against circumcision and trying to end it. You really won't see it happen. It's not a convenient issue. It's kind of like an inconvenient truth. Or the graphite tips at Chernobyl. You know it's wrong, but no one wants to talk about it. So.
Okay, makes sense.
By the way, did people understand? Sorry, I should have. People do understand the graphite tips at Chernobyl reference. I should probably explain. So basically, the USSR they used graphite tips in their fuel rods at their nuclear reactors. Because it was cheaper and it was easier to make, even though it posed a risk, and that's why the Chernobyl reactor melted down in '86. I've been thinking about it since the battle at the reactor last night. I watched bullets and RPGs going off at a nuclear power plant last night live in real time. I still can't get over that. How insane that is! Why would you shell a nuclear power plant? And now the Russians are saying, "Oh well, it's fine because it only hit the administrative building." In other words, it's fine because we got lucky and it missed the other building 30 meters down the road. I mean, really?
Yeah. Well, anyway, moving off of that, because we already covered it pretty extensively last week. So yeah, we've mentioned how circumcision reduces your sensitivity. We've mentioned how it damages your brain. We haven't mentioned that it has been linked to sudden infant death syndrome, and we haven't mentioned that there are approximately 200 known fatalities per year caused by circumcision. Unfortunately, they don't really track circumcision deaths separately, so it isn't a statistical amount that you can really follow. What you're looking at is probably going to be a combination of the SIDS deaths and the number of babies who bled out, because most of the babies, from what I gather, most of the babies who bleed out in hospital, the male babies anyway, do so because of circumcision. Yeah, we also haven't mentioned how you can lose the tip of your penis. We know people on this server who have had that. I'm not going to name any names for obvious reasons. But we've had people say that their penis is completely insensitive and it's driving them insane. We've had people say that the sides of their penis are cracking because the skin is so tight that when they get erect, it actually hurts. We've had a whole bunch of people talk about this. If anyone wants to talk about their personal experience, please do.
And also, the fact that can we also mention how circumcision also ruins the female experience for for women as well whenever it comes to, obviously, whenever it comes to intimacy? Can we also bring that up?
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
because believe it or not, the foreskin has its own. Of course, we all know that the foreskin has its own mucosal membrane, which basically means the foreskin has a better chance of being able to self lubricate. And obviously, women have a problem due to like hormone issues, due to, obvious reasons like trauma or whatever that they went through, from, different things in their life. They'll have problems, basically getting, how can I say this in a appropriate way? They'll have problems with lubrication because of it. Well, if you were to have left him intact, you would have a better chance of having a much easier experience because the fact that the foreskin, when left intact, is self-lubricating. So that extra bonus basically might, don't quote me on this, might end the need to have lubricant entirely.
Oh yeah, men who have foreskins don't need lubricant like at all. It's fairly well known.
Yeah, so maybe women need to understand and acknowledge the fact that it's actually going to hurt them as well whenever it comes to their intimate life and whenever it comes to their own pleasure as well. Because believe it or not, there'll be less friction, therefore the man will feel a lot less. Therefore, he might end up, instead of it becoming a sprint, which nothing wrong with sprints, but it may end up becoming a marathon at any given point. So.
As far as I'm aware, circumcised men only feel anything at the end, like at the conclusion of the event, as it were. And there are studies showing that circumcised men have a much greater chance of having erectile dysfunction. We've got multiple studies on that. We've got one which shows that the majority of Viagra usage is in America, and another which directly goes to circumcised men and asks them about their pill usage, and the majority of like the pill users are circumcised men, not uncircumcised men. So this is damaging the penis. It's flaying a big chunk of it off. So, it's quite a damaging thing to do to somebody. And we are not, unlike feminists, we do not deny that FGM happens. Instead, our tactic is to show people that people who advocate for FGM sound exactly like people who advocate for male circumcision. They say it's cleaner, they say it looks nicer, they say it's traditional, and so on.
I mean, I think of it this way. In a feminist dictatorship, it's uncertain whether circumcision would be illegal. In a men's rights dictatorship, it's absolutely certain that FGM would be illegal.
I wouldn't say dictatorship, but under that government, certainly, yeah. I'm pretty sure under a feminist government, circumcision would be perfectly legal, because we know of a couple of countries that have quite feminist leaderships, and circumcision is still legal there.
And you would, just imagine a men's rights government, what it would be. Equality for all homeless people, equality for domestic violence, equality in education, equality in healthcare, equality in the court system, equality in body autonomy, mutilation, circumcision, or FGM, equality in representation, equality in the military. I mean, if you look at what men's rights activists believe, an MRA government would be in my honest opinion, the most equal society we've ever had on this planet.
It would be better for both men and women, because honestly, feminism does things in its search for power which make it look like the patriarchy hurts men too sort of rhetoric we see from feminism. Because like it terrifies women. It you know it seems to be inclined to give rights to abusive women over like regular people. It seems to uh, it has all of these nasty little rules which assume that men are evil, and that pushes men to be more extreme because they're pushed into a corner in terms of domestic violence and things like that. If you've got a male victim and a female abuser, the best way to increase the female murder rate is to ignore the female victim and the female abuser, because then the man's only option, if he's criminalized merely for being an abuse victim, is to lash out at his abuser. I mean, that's really the only response he has, except to abandon his property and live on the streets. So what's he going to do? He has to take a hit, regardless of what happens. So yeah, we would stop that because we would acknowledge both male and female abusers, and we would work with a level of nuance that feminists just aren't willing to, because we are quite happy to fund male shelters to the extent that they are used, and then look into other programs and plans that would help men specifically. But we're also happy to look into, like, we would be happy for women to have their own shelters. We're not going to change anything in that regard, except to get rid of the crazed ideologies attached to these shelters. So you would have better quality women's shelters because they wouldn't be ideologically driven. You wouldn't have all this insane rhetoric that's plastered all over a lot of these feminist websites that are for major like female abuse charities and things like that. We've come across so many. There's examples of them on the site as well. If you look up the some of our main articles, there are examples of like just crazy feminist ideological stuff on their own websites. Sorry if that was a bit rambly. Okay, so we've gone from circumcision to like, what other things do you think would change if there was an MRA government, do you think?
Does neurodiversity issues count as men's issues?
Well, most autistics who are known to be autistic are male, although honestly, we would also be more inclined to think that female autistics are simply coping better, I think.
I was referring to the mass misdiagnosis of ADHD.
Oh yeah, we would certainly be trying to do something about the mass medication of boys. That's
I'm a victim.
definitely something we'd do.
I'm actually a victim of that myself, if you want to talk about it.
And I am also, and even though, yes, I am a female, I am also a victim of over medication of boys with ADHD. However, yes, I am a victim of being overly medicated for ADHD when I believe that I should have been given more natural methods to deal with it, because the natural methods have worked better.
Let me guess, it was in the early to mid 2000s when you were a child.
Yes.
And they gave you Adderall, they gave you Ritalin, they gave you Vyvanse, all that stuff.
They gave me every single ADHD medication that you could think of. They gave me Cetera, they gave me Concerta, they gave me Ritalin, they gave me they gave me Adderall as well, which I did pretty decent on that. However, I realized that enrolling in more extracurricular activities, such as track, doing things that are very physically active, actually lowered my hyperactivity symptoms. Therefore, I was a much happier individual, and it actually helped me cope with ADHD a lot better. I did better in school, and I was a lot less aggressive uh, as a kid. So, there you go.
Yeah, it sounds like exercise is one of those something that really helps ADHD. I have heard of research where they discovered that ADHD is often caused by lack of exercise and lack of rough play as children and things like that. But yeah, we're absolutely against the over medication of children, and we are for improvements to education which are gender neutral, or rather, which cater to each gender's needs, because the while the marking ought to be gender neutral, the actual the ways that boys and girls are taught often has to be a bit different, because boys are much more rambunctious and much more inclined to run away, and thus get diagnosed with like ADHD symptoms, because uh, they can't cope with sitting still for 7 hours a day and just blankly staring at a chalkboard or a marker board, or like a projector board now is usually what's there. But then there's the way they're marked down artificially for being boys, and we've charted this across multiple countries. In Ireland, we've noted that the marking system is artificially weighted towards the girls, and we have studies showing that when teacher bias is removed, when the teachers don't know who they're marking, boys do just as well as girls. So there are multiple factors here at play towards the low attendance of boys at university and college, and the lower marks of boys, which feminists will tell you are simply because boys are stupid. Anyway, let's move on from there. Anyone got a different topic they'd like to talk about? We can keep this going with just run through every topic that people want to talk about in a few minutes, if you want.
Sorry, I just kind of jumped into the screen, and I haven't met everybody so far. But the main thing I sort of would bring up is due process. Um, I don't know if you guys know about like my story, but um, I was basically Me Too, despite being out and gay, and I wouldn't take on I do away with the presumption of guilt in so many ways. Like I wouldn't I do away with the whole everything that the Me Too movement has kind of brought up, and um the whole believe women thing, and and in a domestic violence kind of situation. You guys probably know that if police go to a domestic violence situation, they put handcuffs on the man first without even assessing the situation. And like in my personal situation, there was uh, one supposed friend. She had just a petty personal grudge against me, and she just wanted to get back at me. And she, she just told the police didn't even get involved. She just told everybody we knew, friends, um, professional contacts, everybody that I'd sexually harassed her, and then boom, I stopped getting invited to um, every to, parties, everything. Dis, I was just let go from my job. I couldn't find another job because everybody knew everybody, and I just ended up having to move states eventually. So it was just the world kind of crumbled down around me, and I didn't even know because nobody would even tell me what had happened. And then eventually I had to find just one kind of kind soul just told me that, okay, she's spreading lies about you. I don't believe her, but, you know, and this was at the height of the Me Too movement, believe it or not. This was the beginning. This was the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018. So you can imagine what the kind of environment was at that point. So I would basically go for due process. Like any claim has to be investigated. Like what proof do you have, and not just a corroborating account from another woman or even another man, because we all know that those can't be depended upon. Like any woman will basically, back up her girl. Like what hard proof have you got? Like CCTVs? Have you got a CCTV call log, photograph, anything? So basically, I would go for due process, and I'm probably jumping to another topic here, but no, I work as an accountant, so and I've tried so many times to destroy the whole pay gap myth, but nobody believes me, even though I work in payroll. So it's just people just don't believe that nowadays. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Not to worry.
Yeah, I've noticed that they just don't want to listen to the pay gap thing because I think it's because they want to uh, get more money and they feel like they could raise their like the amount of money they get. But I also think it's because it's just everywhere that it's real. Like people, it's just all over the place, and it doesn't matter that Harvard have debunked it and a bunch of other places have debunked it. The fact that it's on every newspaper and the first thing you Google when when you Google it, the first thing you get when you Google it is that it's real and it's just the consensus. But they just don't tell you that it's a flat average between men and women's earnings, and the women work most part-time jobs. Women work fewer hours. They take more time off. They don't work for danger pay. They prefer jobs that are in nice, safe, warm environments, and they aren't willing to get their hands as dirty in order to make more money. And it's that's just the way it is, and you can't blame men for that. You can't blame, well, you could probably blame society for it a little bit, but it's ultimately the fault of the individual that this is the way things are. And this plays into why feminists want to use like equity measures where they add things to one side of the scales to tip them in order to correct things instead of actually correcting the source of the problem, because they know that they can't correct the source of the problem and that it's more beneficial for them to weight the scales instead, because they've gotten so many privileges in the past because of it. Missed your mic's on.
I think also like going into your point though, Ma, is like the other issue. It is money. That's like the main thing. It's also like the government, and as we're talking about politics, in an MRA world, we would have due process, and we would be using those studies about the wage gap. But the reason we don't is because it gives money. I mean, we still teach at my own college. Our economics professors are still teaching us about the wage gap, even though they have access to the exact papers by economists themselves. proving the wage gap theory wrong. And it's because they get some money out of it. My school is thinking about, this is sort of men's rights related, these programs on sensitivity training and on police training and security guard training and victim-centered training. And they get benefits, financial benefits, if they start making our security guards go through that program. Another thing, and I put articles in here when you brought up due process about, well, they're both United States based. I'm trying to find some more around the UK, other countries. But just looking like the US, we got the situation with Title IX, VAWA, the fact that guilty until proven as innocent no longer exists. And the specific one, the second one's about Marsy's Law, which is the law they pass or try to repass with the renewal of VAWA, of not having to see the victim not having to see their, the person of which hurt them, victim, quote unquote. Now, obviously, there are real victims, but that kind of law takes away the right of due process. And there's also money being given for these kind of laws to be passed. There's funding being given to VAWA, which passes these laws like Marsy's Law, where suddenly you can no longer see the person who's accusing you. And you don't get the right to confront him or anything. And it's just all financial based. Because they get incentives and they get cuts and they get funding if they follow these and if they implement these. And that funding ultimately comes from the governments themselves, which is funded by all the politicians who vote for these laws and these changes and these programs to be created.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit like the whole Chernobyl and Fukushima thing, where everybody knew there was a problem, but nobody wanted to say anything, because if you said something, you would get in trouble, or at least in Fukushima's case, they thought they'd get in trouble, because it's simply a culture of you can't say anything, you can't, you've got to keep your mouth shut about it. And it's very authoritarian the way they run things, but they'll pretend that they're all the nice floppy, sort of, they're the happy people who just want everyone to get along, but they're absolutely brutal about what they do to enforce this. It's both carrot and stick, as you say. They'll give funding with one hand and they'll beat you down with the other. And they'll make sure you can't talk. They'll try and strip away your... their latest trick is to try and demonetize you directly by telling the people like Visa and Patreon and that you shouldn't be able to use their platform to advocate hate speech. And what they mean by hate speech is anything that disagrees with their viewpoint. So it's kind of, it's kind of like finding out the Care Bears are fascists for a lot of people when they start digging into this stuff, because they think it's like, they're just trying to help, like the poor disabled, like elderly women who, and the trans people and stuff like that. But what they're actually doing is they're tyrants, and it's horrifying.
In my experience with all this, if I talk to, even fairly committed, at least, by title, intersectional feminists, if I talk to them, one at a time, and I explain, just my own situation in general, regarding any of these topics, whether it's selective service or due process or circumcision. It doesn't really matter. I mean, if I personalize it, to me, then, I never get an argument, right? I always get, a verbal and, pretty straightforward support, right? But it does it's very difficult for them to take it any further than that, for the same reason that it's difficult for us to take it further than that. Something else pushes back when they try to speak up for us, just like something pushes back when we try to speak up for us. And I like I say, I mean, I never look at the face of whoever is opposing me or whoever my adversary is. I need to look behind, because if it was just all of the feminists or all of the progressives or all of the neoliberals, whichever, then I would never hear those. I would never hear those words of agreement and support, right? But something is holding up the show. A real simple one is circumcision. I mean, the most dubious and questionable and thin support for circumcision, comes from the medical industry. I mean, there are literally, as you said, that doctor that you crossed swords with actually, tried to support the position of mutilating babies, and it's it comes from somewhere. It's simple enough with her because she makes money on it, and whenever I see some really unreasonable opposition and really carefully crafted and deliberately obtuse objections to the things that we are trying to put out there, I always just assume that somebody's making money. Somebody's making money or developing and maintaining political or social power. And I have found that it's always like that. Um, for example, getting women to speak up for us, for the women who are actually part of our movement, they're frustrated, and behind the frustration, there's some sense of pain and betrayal, from the in group that was supposed to be on their side. As soon as they started being reasonable and looking at men as human beings with our own issues, they're kicked out of the club, and told never to come back, right? But under those conditions, it's not that surprising, to see things like the degradation of due process everywhere, for men, and the tacit acceptance of things like circumcision and selective service. And like I say, the corresponding punishments and penalties, when you try to fight that, those punishments and penalties come from somewhere. Somebody wants to make sure this stuff doesn't change. Okay? And like I said, there's a reason for it. They're not grasping at straws. They're holding on to power, money, influence. And like I said, it's I get my best work done talking one person at a time sometimes, but I have to talk to a lot of different people just to make a little ripple. So like I said, that's my take on it. The people even that we're complaining about here, that we, you know, that we run into on social media platforms and stuff like that. You know, they're speaking out of ignorance, right? And they've got a reason to hold on to that ignorance. Letting go of it is painful. You know, the price of becoming aware is that, for one thing, you learn that you've been stupid all these years, you know, and that you've been ignorant, right? That hurts, you know. So it's not something I have never found any luck just trying to persuade people by, you know, anonymously and aggressively stating our position, because really, I mean, we are in an environment where nobody cares, okay? And you know, we're seen as being, you know, just born deserving of our fate, right? And get people to let go of that and just believe that this is a problem and it's getting worse every day. You know, it's scary as hell, man. It really is. And I try not to be too, you know, too harsh with somebody that I'm trying to persuade, because I know what's going to happen if I really persuade them. It's going to hurt, you know, and it's not going to be any fun. And very likely, you know, if they really get on board, they're going to get kicked out of the club too. So this is not a fast process. Oh, that's my
Yeah, because the truth is never a fast process for everyone to recognize and see. So that's why we're having so
Well,
many.
I'd like to pick up on 2 points that you mentioned. I think Taz, maybe if I could call you that. Yeah. So one was, of course, circumcision. I think that's one of the. I know that's something a lot of people are passionate about, but I think I don't think we're going to make a lot of progress on that because purely because religion is involved, whether it's Judaism or some types of Christianity or, of course, Islam. So because religion is involved and people are very highly attached to religion, I don't think that's going to have any progress over there. Because when it's written in religion, people are just not going to move on that. It's sad, and you know, like people, it's done against little boys' will, and they're mutilated. But when it's written in a book, or people think it's written in a book, then they just won't move. And the second thing is, you did make a very good point about selective service, because I don't know if anyone's aware, but if you think about Ukraine, for example, there's soldiers going into Ukraine on the Russian side. All the conscripts are young men. There are female soldiers, but all the conscripts are young men. And all the on the Ukrainian side, all the men 18 to 60 have been forbidden, like they're not allowed to leave. All the women and children are allowed to leave, but the men have been forbidden from leaving.
I do think that like the religious angle plays into it slightly, but Mist, your mic is still live and you're very, very noisy. Mist, I can hear all your typing. I'm gonna have to mute you.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll try and get a different mic next time.
Okay, if you could mute yourself when you're not talking, that would be good. Anyway, the religious angle, it does play into it slightly, but I think the money angle is much, much, much more powerful. As we have seen in England, England used to have a circumcision rate that was equal to the US. And what happened was that they got rid of, they instituted the NHS, and suddenly most doctors were now NHS doctors, and the NHS doctors couldn't charge people a special fee for performing this extra procedure. And so suddenly circumcision rates drop off dramatically, and it stops being recommended, and it stops having all these medical authorities saying it's a good thing. And nowadays, the circumcision rate in the UK is about the same rate as the population of like Islam, Muslims, and Jews, and those people who do practice it for religious reasons. So it's like 1 to 2% of the population at most, the male population, is circumcised in the UK. It's a tiny, 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 tiny minority. So I do think that by and large, the main reason is the medical authorities. Because we had an article recently, I'll try and get it once I stop speaking, but we had an article recently where like doctors in the UK were outright outraged that too many boys were being circumcised due to physmosis instead of trying other things, and they called it a scandal. And we've had articles from UK and European medical authorities decrying circumcision and saying it's bad for you and stuff like that, and it's not recommended. The only people who recommend circumcision are the American doctors and the other countries where they can make money from it. And
Yeah,
so I
because
do think that's the main motive.
because America runs on capitalism. Americans love capitalism, so they're capitalizing on young boys and babies, body parts, which that's wrong. That's extorting another gender. That's wrong. Does anybody agree?
I agree. It is wrong. Um, I'm circumcised, not Jewish. Um, you know, the the difficulties that it has caused for me are, compared to everything else, they're not insurmountable. Um, but in order to just make my life livable and all of that, as you guys know, I've had to give up a lot, and that's okay. I'll get along. Um, but whenever I talk about it, like I said, even with people that don't really think about it that much, and when they do, they're not very passionate about it. But when I just say, hey, uh, it was part of what interfered with my intimate life while I was married, you know, um, for both of us, and it was part of the overall failure on my part to become sensitive to and address and deal with just trauma in my life. It's like when you start out that way, it's easy to just disregard really bad things that happen to you. It just does. Um, but at the end of the day, uh, even though it's too late for me, it ought not be too late for anybody else ever again. When I frame it that way, there's really not that much of an argument. There, the only thing left is to go back to things like tradition and appearance and these really outrageously dubious health benefits. And it's like those arguments get really weak really quick If I just say, look, they did this to me, and this was back in the early 60s. So, there wasn't even that much. They just did it because that's what people did, and I said, here's what it did to me. And, here's how it affected my life, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, because when I talk about stuff like that, I don't intend to have an argument with anybody. I just intend to say, look, you may go ahead and think whatever you want to think, but this is the reality of it. This is how it works out in real life. And it didn't just interfere with me as a person. If you don't care about me, that's fine, but it had a negative effect on other people, and for every one of me who actually says it out loud, there are millions, that they just live with it because it never occurs to them that this might be wrong. So yeah, I agree with you, Maddie. It's it's an abomination. And I think people that support, for example, support circumcision for religious reasons, if I were them, I might reconsider hoping there's an afterlife, because I would not want to be that person and go to face my creator after I pass out of this world, because they're going to have a lot of explaining to do.
Okay, so we've covered circumcision. We've covered quite a few things today. Does anyone else have another issue that they would like to mention? Because I feel like this has gone on for about an hour, so I think that's a good length for a stream. And after that finishes, we can go into free talk, and everyone can chat about whether they'd like to.
Can we talk about making the first move as a female and how that can be amazing for men, as in they feel safe and that they're not going to be abused?
I think that's
go ahead.
You know what? Before you do, though, that might be a whole program of its own.
Okay.
That's a no. Go ahead and lead it, but my vote is that we ought to just dedicate a program to it, because that's a deep well.
We could do an episode of it maybe a couple weeks from now. We do have a couple things lined up now, but we could bring it up a little bit right now just because it relates, Taz, to when you were talking about just generally your life of it with like relationships and just like relationships in general, and needing to create that healthy boundary, and having the woman make the first move helps.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of a dating episode in general, like a men's rights perspective on dating and gender roles. So I think that's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, it would be an interesting way of debunking the whole pickup artist thing, I think. Because they seem to get genuinely confused between us and pickup artists. There's what's it called? Cracked article on the men's rights movement, where they conclude by saying that they don't actually have any issues, like they don't have any rights issues at all that they want to talk about. And that should have been the point where they went, hold on a second, have we got the right people here? Because throughout the entire article, they were citing pickup artists. Like they were talking about stuff that Rusha said and things like that. And there wasn't a single thing on that entire article that was related to us in any way. They just used the word men's rights activists. And it's sad and it's funny and it's stupid and people believe them. It's the worst part.
I think
because it benefits them to write that. It benefits them to frame us in that way. If it benefits them to basically just discriminate against this movement and not acknowledge male issue for a decent amount, then the best way to do it is to put us in and delegitimize us, to put us in with all these groups that may not have the best reputations, and just basically spread a bunch of BS.
It is, but we're vulnerable to that. I mean, the expectation from everyone, even civilians, just normies, is that for men's advocates for men and boys, if we let that we have a mask, and when we let it slip underneath, all what there is an incel or a pickup artist or aggressive red pillar or some kind of deranged MGTOW. And like what Madison was saying, that a frank discussion about women making the first move, and what that would do to things like romance and dating and intimacy and all the things that
It would actually give women secretly more power in the relationship too, which they don't understand because they always feel like they're losing themselves. They always feel like, they are constantly under a man's control. Well, if you make the first move, guess what? You immediately have the ball in your court immediately.
Right.
Women try that with Bumble and it didn't work. They kept complaining about it.
Yeah. That was I mean, it's like any other online dating app. It's it fails out of the gate to do what they promote it to be doing. It does not do that. It does something else, which is lucrative, but it's corrupt and not worth pursuing.
But men secretly love it and make the first move.
Yeah, in person, and I mean, in a more how you would say it, organic way. An MRA, certainly myself. You mentioned that this provides an empowerment for women that do it. I have heard that is true, and an advocate for men and boys does not mind that. I mean, this is another one of those male male privileges that if y'all want mine, you can have it, because it's never been anything to me but a curse on my life. And I haven't gotten any of the checks for it. It is a form of power, I suppose, but I don't know. It was never very useful for me. I got nothing out of it. So I mean, I don't know. I'm fine with women making the first move. Really.
I mean, I contest the idea that it's well, you could frame it as a powerful thing, but it's I just have this image of the man getting down on one knee to propose to the woman, and that's not a position of power. I mean, I think if an MRA proposes, the ideal thing for us is just grab their hands as normal, but don't get down on one knee. Just stand as equals. And I think that's a powerful statement in of itself.
Yeah. Although that part of the process is kind of way down the road from people just starting to get together. You guys know me. I am not going to make the first move ever again. It's just not going to happen. If somebody makes the first move with me, that's another matter. It's still, I have to consider the situation, and I have to consider the person making that move. But I mean, honestly, I cannot think of a valid reason for that not to be happening. I really can't. I mean, maybe somebody else knows better than me, but you're going to have to sell me. Somebody make the pitch that men should always make the first move, because most of what I hear out there about that, is thin at best.
Not to mention, I think it would prime women to accept rejection, because that way they'll get a taste of what it's like for men as well, because a lot of the times that's what it gets them. It gets them like rejected, or it gets them feeling like they're being led on or whatever. They'll know both sides, so that way they'll know how to approach, men or just anybody just in general
Right.
with a little bit more grace, with a little bit kinder as well, and they'll lose that entitlement complex like they have so freaking much.
Right. Plus the fact that, as young men are so often told, if they, if with all those other things they learn, persistence and humility, eventually it will work. I mean, you got to remember to put that carrot out there. So you can tell them, no, really, ladies, if you do this way, it will work. You will have what you want.
And guess what? Because you'll
it's
be the
worth
one
it.
actually making the decisions on who you decide to date. You taking control basically means you won't be settling, because you will basically be pursuing the men that you want to pursue, that you feel like is going to lead you to the lifestyle, or to the, to the men that you feel are worthy of your attention.
Yeah.
You have to
It
give.
also forces them to have responsibility too. Because let's be honest here, the person who makes the first move usually is not always, but usually is expected to take on more of the responsibility of creating the safe space per se in the relationship, and like being more the protective person per se, because they're seen
That
as
might, that might be why a lot of women don't do it. But I mean, if I had a daughter, I would absolutely teach her to make the first move and to be confident. I mean, I just treat her like any boy I had. Like,
My dad taught me. It worked.
I think a lot of guys would really go for it. I mean, they'd see you as confident, and I think that would really endear you to them and make you stand out from the others if you did that.
And like I said,
My dad treated me kind of normally. He was like, you know what, you're different, and you make the first move. I actually think it's kind of a good thing, because that means that you're the one in control, and I'm proud of you for that. So, good job.
and like I said, it will force the question, why haven't we been doing this all along? Because it's like, if people never get curious about that, then they're never going to try it. I mean, let's face it, making the first move, is to be crude, kind of a percentages game for one thing. It's a longer road. It's more complicated. It can be more difficult. But like I said, when you can prove, and Madison, you and a lot of women these days who are doing it, you can say, yeah, it was all that, but it was worth it. I ended up with what I was looking for. And
Yeah,
like I said,
I'm married now, so it worked.
right. Yeah. and I mean, well, A, married, but B, married to somebody, of the type that you were intending to marry. It's like, yes, I got married, but it was I got married to somebody I wanted to get married to.
And
And I
also,
didn't have to settle.
and I'm going to get personal for a second. I made the choice to save myself for marriage. So for me, I was weeding through the guys and was like, no, that's not what I want. No, I'm not going to make the first move on that one. And, I wanted to pull in the men that believed in the same things that I did, that, raised, with, religion, loves Jesus, all of that stuff. I wanted to do that. So what did I have to do? I had to take responsibility, and I had to say, okay, then it is up to you to make moves and with the men that only believe in those things, that are on the same page as you. Those are only the men that you can pursue. Those are the only men that you can make the first move on. And do not settle for less. It will teach women not to settle for anything because they'll be the ones making the moves and they'll be the ones in control. Therefore, they'll get what they want by taking the initiative and taking ownership of the relationship by not settling. They actually won't settle for men because guess what? They'll be the ones actually being actively involved in the relationship. That is what is going to be the key. And the reason why I always made the first move is because I was saving myself for marriage. So that way I felt like, hey, buddy, you're not going to, whatever you think that you're going to get, you're not gonna, because I'm the one in control. Because guess what? I made the first move, therefore the ball is in my court. Therefore, I have the majority of the control here whenever it comes to what we do.
Right.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
perspective. I mean, I do think that it's going to massively increase, like you say, it's going to massively increase the options that women have. They won't have to just pick between 5 different guys and they have to pick basically on the spot. Then instead they can widen their dating pool to basically every guy. But what about Taj? You were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, in light of what Maddie was talking about, this, fairly delicate balance of power and I don't know, generosity. I think about the idea of men widely becoming the pursued and women widely becoming the pursuers. I think what holds a lot of people up is that they don't believe, that they're trained and suited and prepared, for that to happen. And probably that's true. There'd be an adjustment period. But the fact is, like Madison, you were saying how much, how many options doing it this way affords you. And I question myself and say, would any of that really bother me as a man? And I'm like, no, not really. Not really. I'm not, I'm not a control freak. I don't mind leading, but I just as soon follow, depending on the activity. And like I said, I have yet to hear anybody that isn't, talking a bunch of really weak, crazy, bio truths about how men are supposed to be and how women are supposed to be. Haven't heard anybody just sit down and say, look, this is the reason why we can't do it this way. Because it doesn't exist. I mean, it hasn't existed for a long time. And since, before any of us was born, we could have let all that go and turned the whole thing around, this way. But like I said, people are afraid of change and need to, if there's any promoting to be done, it's promoting, the advantages for individual people. Like I said, Maddie, like yourself, just say, look, I don't care what you think and I don't care what you say. This is how it worked for me and I'm happy. I'm, you know what I mean? It's like, if that makes me wrong, then I don't care to be right, and then
And my husband when my husband said the things that he said to me in the beginning stages of us dating, he's like, by the way, he was like, by the way, we're not getting physically intimate until we get married because that is what I believe in. The fact that he said that whenever I made the first move, it made me feel very good. And I was like, I made the right decision making the first move with this guy. I made a very good investment. There you go.
like I said, this is one of the, I'm not a big believer in, personal testimonials for everything, but this is one of those things where, that should be the the primary promotion is just a simple statement that this is how it worked, and it did work. You know, the results were both expected and positive. You know, and it's like if you can do that often enough, then it doesn't matter what the opponents of it say, because people will stop caring. They'll stop listening to that. You know, especially young men. You know, when they just hear, you know, and are exposed to the idea that things like this, you know, are not only workable, but they can be made common. Then, like I say, you know, all the, you know, the alpha male red pillar pickup artist stuff will start to look foolish, you know, and wasteful. And then they'll start to ask themselves, why am I going through all this? You know, it looks like I don't have to. You know, like I say, that is passive least resistance. You know, if it can be made to look possible, you know, and doable, people will take the easy way. You know, that's just like I said. You know, that's just the way I see it. It's been a long time since there was a necessity for men to be the pursuer, protector, provider, et cetera, et cetera. You know, if we don't need that anymore, fine. You know, but if we're not going to do it that way anymore, then something else has to be done. Right now, nobody's doing anything very much except grasping at straws and, like I said, kind of looking foolish. You know?
Well, we're glad everyone's talking, but we should probably end it here, and we can keep the rest of the dating conversation for when we do a Dating Friday chat, because that is a really good idea, and that be something we can all discuss about and relate on. So, thank you all for coming. This has been the Men's Human Rights Discord Friday chat. We enjoy having you guys here every week. We are here every Friday, 10 a.m. Central, 4 p.m. UK time, 11 a.m. Eastern, and we hope to see you all next week.